Diane to come out, please. As I said, I'm just hanging out up here. So this conversation, Rob, how are you? Haven't seen
Good,
you
how are
since
you? New York.
Diane. If any of you have maybe already read the article in our magazine, which basically sets up this whole conversation, it's a quite detailed explanation of the same issues that we're discussing here, and Diane and I co-wrote the article. We quoted Rob in it. But the point is that if we want to think about the opportunity that Internet of Things creates in society, maybe we, to be honest, what got me excited about it was that, we talk a lot about IoT and man-machines and network, but IoT as a concept really has never caught the public's imagination at all. I think that's, we've got it surrounding us, we've got Teslas, etc. But if you think of it as the way that we will fight climate change, it really starts to give you a clarity of focus on why it matters. And it was actually Diane explaining that to me that got this whole train of thought going. This was how we wrote the article together. But what we're here to discuss is this issue that there is an extraordinary opportunity before us by integrating our energy and other systems to really make a big difference in what may still be the biggest issue facing the planet. We started with terrorism on the last session. Now we're talking about climate change. But interestingly, the energy equation is a key factor in both. Let me just quickly introduce Diane. She's the executive director at the Environmental Defense Fund. She was a senior policy analyst in the White House on environmental issues under President Clinton. She chaired President Bush's interagency task force on oceans. She was at the EPA for 20 years. I didn't even know that myself. And she's done all surprises. She's done all kinds of other stuff. She's a lawyer, admitted to the Supreme Court bar, et cetera, et cetera. Rob is Senior Vice President of NRG Business Solutions, which is it's the largest independent commercial utility, right? Or is that the right way to put it?
Independent power producer.
Yeah, it's the largest independent power producer in the United States. It does have some local utility subsidiaries. It's mostly a wholesaler. Rob runs its B2B portion. Right. But the interesting thing about NRG, if I can just say that, and steal Rob's thunder slightly, this is what's the revenues annual of energy?
10, 12 billion?
Yeah, $10 or $12 billion company in the energy production business has committed to reducing its carbon footprint by 50% by 2030 and by 90% by 2050. Mm-hmm. That is a very aggressive and very admirably ambitious target that I don't think any major utility has been that aggressive. So that's impressive. But let me just start by asking you, Rob, how are we going to get there?
Well, I think that, the way that we think through how we're going to address climate change and how we're going to do things. Today we're talking about the Internet of Things and the way that it can have an impact. At the end of the day, the energy ecosystem is made up of two things. It's where you get your energy, and then it's how you use it. And we've always addressed this dynamic by always talking about how you produce it. So what kind of power plant? Is it renewable? Where does it come from? And what the Internet of Things does, and I warned you I was going to say this, it does two things. It creates a whole bunch of energy need, right? Because all of these sensors and the things that we're doing, they actually use electricity, which is kind of the lifeblood of the future.
Well, the data centers are the single biggest utility consumers in many states.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Right? So the Internet of Things is going to create that, but it's also going to give us the opportunity to harness the power of that other side of the equation. So managing load, thinking about how people use lights, making sure that you can dynamically adjust what we're using with what we're getting. And as we continue down this positive path of moving towards more and more renewable power, you increase intermittency into the system. And everybody here has a phone or a computer or is enjoying, the screens behind me. All of those count on clean, and what I mean by clean is frequency clean energy, because it's all technology and it requires really good, high-quality energy. You don't do that without having a way to adjust the dynamics of the market. And we all want to see more renewables and more wind and more solar on the ground. And as you do that, you increase that dynamic. And what I'm here to tell you guys, and what Business Solutions is about, and what NRG is definitely driving towards, is harnessing the power of our customers. We've got 3 million residential customers. I've got probably 10,000 commercial customers. Harnessing the power of how we use energy, how we think about energy, to help balance that out, to allow more and more penetration of renewables into markets. And you've seen that in other countries. You've seen it here in California. And it's something that smart people and advanced technologies are going to be able to couple with advanced technology and lower costs on renewables. And that's how we're going to get there.
And of course, intermittency is just a function of the fact that we want to rely more on solar and wind in particular, and other less predictable power supplies. Talk about how you think about this, Stein.
I want to start with what people used to think. People used to think not that long ago that if you want to have solar or wind on the system, maybe the system could handle 10%, 15%. And then people started to get clever and they said, well, okay, maybe 20%, 25%. We have countries now that are going days with 100% renewable energy. And why is that?
Which countries?
Portugal has done it. I think Portugal has the record, 4 days.
4 days with entirely renewable sources.
Entirely renewable. And I expect that record to be broken several times every year for the rest of our time, between now and 2050. Because we're getting better and better.
Done that too?
We're getting better and better. And the thing that drives that is if you say, well, it's not 10% solar, how much can we put on the grid? It's not 10% wind, how much can we put on the grid? The answer comes from being able to say, it's not just about what we put into the grid. It's about how the grid responds. It's about, okay, if solar is going up right now, are there uses of electricity that don't matter when they happen? So we'll ramp those up. If a cloud goes over the sun and the amount of power being produced from solar panels starts to go down a little bit, what can we adjust out there on the demand side? For 100 years, we haven't been able to ask that question. The Internet of Things allows us to answer that question and allows us to react. And what that means is instead of just thinking about turning up and down the power as people turn it on and off things, you can say, all right, solar's happening, wind is happening, let's make sure the grid is responding. Let's turn on storage and turn off storage. And the essential ingredient is information, and that's what the Internet of Things provides. It's the information that can drive the dynamic grid that we need to make it clean. That's the fundamental thing. Now, your next question maybe is going to be, what about all those regulations? But I'll save that.
That might be too complicated for me.
Nothing is too complicated for you,
what
David.
it reminds me of? The very first conference that I ever organized myself was Fortune Brainstorm in 2001, and one of the people there was Amory Lovins. And he was, at that time, pounding the table that we need to think of conservation as much a way of producing power as generating it. And he's been an apostle of that for a long time. But essentially what you both are saying is that conservation can be harnessed in a way that we never could before because of an interconnected system when we get to an end-to-end IoT-based infrastructure. So I'd love to just hear you both talk a little bit more about the mechanics of how that might work. I mean, I happen to love Tesla as an example, but you don't have to use that, but feel free.
Well, we'll start. So Amory would start with just reduce all of the energy demand up front, right? He believes strongly, and I think he's actually pretty intelligent about the issues. He's been studying them for a long time. Let's start with reducing how much we need overall. And then the dynamic adjustments, this dynamic conservation that you're talking about is, we're talking about the same thing. At the end of the day, we currently have a kind of a command and control system, right? And our role in that is we flip the switch on and we power stuff up and we don't give any thought to when and how or why we do it.
You mean we, NRG?
No. I get paid every day to think about that. You don't think about it. We'll just pick on you.
Yeah,
you don't think about it, right? And most rate structures, and so we can talk about regulatory, environment, but most rate structures don't tell you to do any different. Your power costs the same no matter when you do it. Think about a world where you take that command and control structure where you flip the light on and somebody makes a power plant go, and then you take that power plant and you make it powered by the sun or by the wind in a very local area, because the broader you get, the more interconnected you get, the better you run lower of a risk of running out of wind or running out of solar, right? And so broad spaces can make things happen. But in just a little microcosm of your world, if the sun starts to falter, right now you don't think about, oh, I need to go turn off my refrigerator, I need to go do that. But you have grid operators and big utilities who provide you your power here in California, or generators that are balancing the system for you. In some markets, and we do this for industrial customers, we have not the Internet of Things, but we're using our customers' loads or their demands to balance that market already, and we're doing it without firing off a single piece of generation. In the world of kind of what Diane was referencing before, we thought you could put 20% of the solar on the ground, and then you had this plant that you moved around to make it match. Take that same amount of solar and take the Ritz-Carlton. The Ritz-Carlton, given the right signals and the right environment and a little bit of control, can adjust the way they behave, right? And can do it dynamically and can do it quickly, and nobody in this room would know about it. That's the future, right? And understanding, back to the data point, first you have to understand what the Ritz-Carlton can do, right? Do they have 7 boilers back there? Do they have 3? Do they need them all day long? What's their usage look like? All of that data comes together to help build a plan so that a retail customer, like this hotel, can be a contributor to that energy ecosystem.
But one of the things
let me just add one point. So when the internet was invented, and I can admit that I remember that.
Did you work for Al Gore?
I did not work for Al Gore at the time. But when the internet was invented, nobody could imagine all of the economic opportunities that the internet was going to generate. Nobody could imagine the innovation and creativity that was going to be brought into the system. What the Internet of Things does for our electricity system is begin to create that same possibility. So I can't sit here and tell you everything that people are going to come up with, but I can tell you that we need to open it up so that more can participate. And that is going to help us drive the system cleaner. I'm going to give you one example. State of Illinois has had a very traditional rate structure, a very traditional set of regulations, a utility that turned things on and off when we turn things on and off, and everybody's happy. There's a couple problems with that system. The one I care about most is there's no incentive in that system to get cleaner. Now we can and we have put in place regulations that say you got to get cleaner no matter what. But what if we had instead incentives to get cleaner? What if we said people who can figure out ways to get cleaner are going to get rich? People who can figure out ways to get cleaner are going to be able to participate in that system,
pay less,
make it cleaner, pay less, or
make
get
more.
paid.
Yeah.
Right? So we have regulations now that say Illinois has to reduce its carbon footprint by 34%. And Illinois will do that. But they've made 2 changes recently, and they're about to make more, that are going to take them to that goal and actually pass that goal with or without that goal. So those 2 changes. The first one is to say, all right, that the data that's coming out of the grid, the data that's on the smart meter, that's the representative of the Internet of Things, that has to be accessible to all kinds of businesses that want to innovate and participate in that system. So if you could figure out how to put together 1 million iPhones worth of energy demand and turn it up and down when the system needs you to do that, you can make money on that. But you have to have the data from the system. Up to now, utilities have said, we own that data, nobody else can have it. The other thing is that the traditional, this is going to shock those of you who don't participate in the utility world, but utilities are one business where you can make money by deciding to redecorate your offices because you're getting paid by how much capital you invest. That is crazy. That is crazy, and it is
because
widely
you're publicly
accepted.
regulated, and
because
that's
you're
how
publicly
this works.
regulated.
Yeah.
And so if you say, well, we need to build a new building or paint our office or whatever, you're making a profit on that. But what EDF, my organization, has worked with Illinois and the utility there is to shift that so that they're going to get paid for how well they perform, including how much they drive down their emissions. That is a fundamental change. It brings the whole idea of the markets that have created so much innovation in every other part of our economy into the utility regulatory system.
Yeah.
So you open it up so not only the utility can participate, and then you create incentives to get clean. we're going to see an unfolding beyond what anybody today imagines.
So among other things, the IoT is going to allow market forces to work better in
Exactly.
the energy economy.
Exactly.
I want to give audience question opportunity or two. Okay, Mark. Get the mic here. And unfortunately, we're going to have to move pretty quickly here.
Okay, comment, not a question. Right in line with this whole discussion, as David knows, I have a little conference called FIRE that we do every year. We just came out of it, and we designed a new kind of computer system called flow computing. And the whole point was to create an Earth energy monitoring system using IoT. And it's just been funded. So for the first time, a couple years from now, the world leaders will be able to get a visualization of all the use of energy and see, are the Paris Accords being honored? And are all these things being done properly? So we'll be able to see energy flow around the planet in real time, visually.
That's a very cool thing.
That's
I'm so
very
happy
cool.
to hear that.
Right in front of
I will call you if somebody else doesn't have their hand up. Okay. Okay. Oh, let's get Ken, and then if we have time, we'll go to Tara. Just for fairness. Sorry.
First of all, I love this topic because it's an area.
Identify yourself so they know.
Ken Washington, Ford Motor Company. So I really love this topic because it's rich with opportunity. But one of the issues is energy storage, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the opportunities to use net zero carbon, high density liquid hydrocarbons using clean energy as a storage mechanism, so you can transfer that to other sectors like the airline industry or the heavy trucking industry, where battery electric vehicles and batteries for transportation is not a feasible option. And they're huge contributors to the carbon footprint that we're giving our planet. And that would solve both your storage problem and the carbon emissions problems for these other sectors.
So I love to hear about all the new ideas people are coming up with, and every week I'm excited about a different one, and sometimes it's hydrogen and sometimes it's something else. What I know is this, that if we get the market signals right and we reward people who are putting storage into the system and we reward people who are coming up with those ideas, we're going to get ideas like that. Maybe it'll come to scale, or maybe somebody will come up with something better. So my focus is, I'm not the one to pick, but we can make sure that the signals are clear in the system, that we care about providing a system that is remarkably cleaner as fast as humanly possible.
I just want to pile on, because I don't get paid to paint my office. We're a competitive energy company, not a utility.
You're generally not a regulated utility.
Like all the way down to about 1%.
Yeah.
Right. So we fluctuate. Well, there's nothing that I believe more than competitive signals and competitive markets and open access. I think all of those things, open access to information, open access to be able to aggregate and compete and comply and play in markets is important, because it brings opportunities and thoughts and people to invest in new technologies. I think that storage, both for the traditional stuck on the ground kind of stuff, as well as flying in the air kind of stuff, is an absolute future. And it's something that has to happen, and it's not going to happen by someone saying, go study this and put some money at it. It's going to happen when you open markets up and create opportunities for people to invest their own capital and get going. Yep.
Okay. Can you do a quick one? Yeah, okay. And then quickly answer and we'll have to wrap.
It would be great to have your point of view, both with a storage company using ICE and no carbon, and also with sort of low latency IoT energy things. The response from venture has not been very interested in energy, partially for time horizon. And the response from government when applying for grants has been Silicon Valley has not been shown to be successful in this area, literally in writing in the grants response. So the kind of innovation you guys need, at least for two of our companies, is very much halted by the current dynamics of the system. So have you seen changes there? Or there's anything positive on the horizon?
So at Environmental Defense Fund, our theory is that if we go out and get the rules changed so that the markets open up, and we make sure that people understand those possibilities, that'll change that dynamic you're talking about. Because the capital needs to get rewarded in a certain time frame. And we can help make sure that the rules are going to work for that. And we're starting to see that in Illinois, California, New York, and they're going to start seeing investment and benefit from it. Texas is also a place where a lot of that is happening. And as those places start to bloom, I think we'll see a spreading of those rules because the states will say, wait a minute, I want that investment here.
Okay.
So real quick, at NRG, we see a lot of this stuff come in, and we have lots of opportunities to meet and understand or try to understand new technologies. I will tell you that I understand the ground that you're talking about and understand where the problem is. Energy doesn't lend itself to the super high pivot, everybody gets to spend a bunch of money and then make a bunch of money in the end quickly game. What it does do, though, is, and it's doing now more and more, is that we are seeing governments, or at least at the state level, California, Texas to some extent, have some programs that are providing the opportunity to test and pilot technology like you're talking about, where there is enough of an economic return and a long enough horizon around revenue that people can get funded to go to the next step, right? I think that is kind of that almost meet in the middle place between traditional energy investment and super high growth VC investment from the Valley. Does that make sense?
There is a whole conference worth of follow-up that could be done on this, and maybe we'll do that. I urge everyone to read the article that Diane and I wrote in the magazine that Techonomy proudly distributed here. Thank you both for being part of this conversation, and let's keep working on it all together.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.